We are therefore fortunate to work with a minister who understands these issues, not just from a youth employment lens, but also when it goes wrong and results in potential interfacing with the criminal justice system. I've been fortunate to work with the Honourable Natalie Hutchins, Minister for Corrections, Crime Prevention, Youth Justice and Victim Support through my role with the Women's Correctional Services Advisory Committee and as part of the Youth Justice Reference Group. I'm aware of the importance of youth employment to this government as one of the critical levers to divert young people away from the youth justice system, to give effect to our Victorian Youth Justice Strategy and broader youth strategy. Minister Hutchins is focused on improving community safety by acting on the root causes of crime and helping young people turn their lives around. This includes the operation of systems which increase rehabilitation and tackle recidivism. She also takes into account improved victim access to justice through listening to their needs and changing the law. Building on her work leading to government's historic commitment to treaty with the state's traditional owners, she's committed to addressing the overrepresentation of Aboriginal Victorians in the justice system. From her days as a union official to a small business owner, a mum to a minister, Minister Hutchins is committed to fighting for workers and ensuring a better future for all Victorians. She's always been a fierce advocate for gender equality, for workers' rights, and for justice for Aboriginal Victorians and young people. In her previous roles, she's particularly proud to have created laws to improve conditions for vulnerable workers, establish Respect Victoria, and ensure women have an equal voice in everything the government does. She was elected to Parliament in 2010 and has represented the seat of Sydenham since 2014. I now invite the Minister to turn on her microphone and camera and provide the keynote speech at today's launch.
Thank you so much, Melissa, and what a great opportunity to be able to speak today. Can I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to say a special thank you to Auntie Georgina Nicholson for her advocacy that she does, but also for her wonderful welcome to country today as a Wurundjeri elder. I've also believe that Jill Hennessy is also joining us today, the Honourable Jill Hennessy, member for Altona, of course, our immediate past Attorney General, who I've worked very closely with over many years, and who's a fierce advocate for young workers' rights. Dana Nelson, the Chair of WEstjustice. Thank you, Dana, for having me along today. To Melissa, who is an absolute champion of workers across the West, and of course runs WEstjustice as the CEO and does a great job of that and being heard across government. Colleen Bergman, who's here from Youth Now, and Frankie Lay. Can I just say congratulations to you and your team on the report, Ignorance is Not Bliss. I thought that was a really good title, actually, to put to a youth employment justice program, because it is all about knowing your rights. And what you've just taken us through in terms of the findings, I don't think are a shock to any of us, but there's certainly an absolute eye-opener in terms of what level of, I guess, abuse is happening in terms of underpayment and other complex issues that face many young workers. And I really want to acknowledge the broader work that WEstjustice does as well in providing essential legal services and advocacy across Melbourne's West, particularly now in the midst of COVID, when things are extremely challenging and many of us have been hard hit in our communities. And everything from job losses through to even more insecure employment. And it's not just the technical kind of outcomes of today around the changes, it's also the voices that you've been able to capture in this report of young people who aren't often heard when it comes to employment rights and experiences. And I know the work really shows a unique insight to both the systemic disadvantages for many communities across the West. And I hope that in the recommendations being taken seriously by us as a government and of course the federal government, that we do see some change in this area. I know since the project began, WEstjustice has delivered 37 community legal education sessions, reaching about 1,800 young people. That's phenomenal, as well as recovering the amount that Frankie referred to, which was $156,000 of legal entitlements for over 32 young people. That's a great achievement. But also heightening awareness around young people's rights at work is a really important piece of the work. The young people, many young people across the West are facing unprecedented challenges right now with isolation and disengagement. And it's even harder for some of our most vulnerable young people who may be becoming disconnected from their own communities and families. And we know that access to work and stable employment for young people helps to avoid becoming involved in the cycle of offending, and providing the sense of purpose and self-worth is absolutely vital in keeping young people on track and turning their lives around for those who have chosen the wrong path and made the wrong decisions. It's not easy to break down those barriers to employment, and without the right knowledge and responsibilities, rights and responsibilities knowledge at work for young people, they can be open to exploitation, as we see through this report, and unfair treatment and exploitation. They're also less likely to seek advice. I agree with some of the outcomes that have been recommended with this report, and that is being able to deliver more key messages and education across our school system, even across our university and TAFE sector, would be extremely important part of the outcomes of this work. WEstjustice found that young people are commonly victims of wage theft and put in unsafe work positions. I know from my former role as the Industrial Relations Minister of this state, but also before that, my time as the Assistant Secretary of the Victorian Trades Hall, that many young workers are put in very, very vulnerable safety situations at work. And unfortunately, there are a lot of young women who are experiencing sexual harassment and sexual abuse in their workplaces as well. And it's not always easy to stand up for themselves, particularly in precarious employment. And quite often, young people will walk away from the job than to put up with that situation, or out of fear of some sort of retribution if they are to raise that issue. And of course, built into all of these complexities is those young people who may not be permanent residents, and they've got that fear of losing their security of being here in Australia, or also being from cold communities where they're the main breadwinner in their family and needing to do what they can to keep hold of that employment. We know that they usually, through the report, and I know from experience that young people usually lose their work in pretty unfair circumstances. And of the young people involved in the project, 71% were involved in some form of risky or insecure work, leading to poor employment outcomes, as well as a lack of understanding about employment laws and, of course, what to do about any injustices that were happening to them. Being employed for the first time can present some pretty unfamiliar landscapes for young people. A new workplace can also present challenges in terms of proximity, language, and culture. So it's really terrific to learn that 93% of the young people that secured employment after receiving legal assistance from the Youth Employment Project said that legal education made it easier for them to find and keep a job. I also know from firsthand experience as a young worker back in the day, I want to say a million years ago, but really probably about 30 years ago, in some of my first experiences in employment, I was working as a printer's assistant when I was 17 years old and in my first year of uni. And I realised that myself and colleagues were being underpaid at the time, and also some of my colleagues were being put into very unsafe situations. I knew what to do at that age because I came from a very embedded union family that I'm very lucky to have educated me in what my rights were and certainly where to go. So at that tender age of 17, I was able to encourage my colleagues to join the relevant union, and we were able to get an enterprise bargaining agreement in place, but that wasn't before they dismissed me. I fought an unfair dismissal and got my job back, all within the course of a 12-month period. And it was a big celebration when we were able to get an enterprise bargaining agreement in place that paid everyone appropriately. But as I said, I came from a background where I knew what my rights were. They were instilled in me at a very young age. And I had family members that were very vocal about what their rights at work were, and how, as young workers, myself, my brothers, my cousins, how we all needed to stand up for ourselves and know what our rights are. And I know that's not a given in a lot of families. I was very privileged to have that support back then. But as a government, I'm really pleased to say, and my colleague who's on the line, Jill Hennessy, really championed this cause, and that is for the government's move to ban wage theft and set up a wage inspectorate. That's been a great achievement of the government. And when I spoke in support of the wage theft bill just last year, I reflected on the many, many young people in my own electorate of Sydenham who've come forward with some pretty horrific stories of underpayment and really bad treatment. And even when we first went into our first shutdown from the COVID pandemic, I had a lot of young people who were employed casually, but had been employed for quite a long time at various, particularly hospitality and restaurants, that just lost their jobs overnight with no recourse, and certainly some of them didn't even get a last paycheck. And we were able to advise them on how to go forward, but certainly having these new regulations in place is now an absolute game changer. Of course, there's more work to be done, and I know the recommendations in this report will go a long way in helping that happen, particularly with a change and a focus on the resourcing of the Fair Work Ombudsman, and also the work that is done on a federal level around promoting young people's rights and their knowledge through both the schools, through legal centres, employment services, and as many agencies as we can push that out through. Can I also say that the achievement that's already been announced by WEstjustice, by Frankie in her presentation around the Train the Trainer for community employment brokers is a stroke of genius. That's a fantastic initiative, and one that will make some real change, no doubt, in the months and years to come. So just finally, I just wanted to talk a little bit about my role as the Minister for Youth Justice and Crime Prevention, and how I've seen firsthand over the last 12 months how absolutely critical employment is to young people and helping them get their lives back on track. This is the key reason why the Department of Justice and Community Safety works closely with our Department for Jobs, Precincts and Regions, and of course our Department of Education, to make sure that we get young people who are coming out of the youth justice system engaged in either education or employment. Young people aged between 17 and 24 can access vocational support through DET's Reconnect program, which helps plan young people into work and gives them a mentor and access to support. It's also delivered across 26 TAFE providers and, of course, our local lens. And the department is also working with the Jesuits Social Services to pilot their new employment program to be delivered as part of our ongoing crime prevention strategy. And this program supports secondary and post-secondary students to build work readiness and work connection long-term in both the Flemington and North Richmond areas. We're also making sure that young people in contact with the youth justice system have access to skills-specific training. So many of you would know of Street, who are a social enterprise cafe that give kids access to accredited hospitality training before they go out and work in cafes and partner with restaurants for employment opportunities. This has been a really great program, a little bit stalled during COVID just because of the shutdown of industry. But also there are other programs such as Handbrake Turn, which is about taking young people with an interest in cars and engines and exploring the work that's available to them and training in the automotive industry. And for those that are keen on horticulture and nature, we've also had the Sweet Justice program delivering training in commercial beekeeping at the Malmesbury Youth Justice Centre, a program that I've seen up close, an extraordinary program that the graduates of that program that have left the youth justice system have been snapped up into jobs because unbeknownst to me before I knew about this program, there is a national shortage of beekeepers. So this has actually worked out to be a really good career path for a lot of young men who have been through this program. So it's all about getting that real experience for young people to build their confidence, get a sense of purpose and pride and connection. And we'll continue to roll out these opportunities across our local government networks and across a range of different sectors to ensure that we can look at long-term initiatives to engage young people in education and employment opportunities, both for those that have come into contact with the justice system, but also those that have been in custody. And I really look forward to continuing my work with WEstjustice into the future to make sure that there is meaningful work for not only kids that come into contact with the justice system, but for all kids and young people across the West that are looking for those opportunities and that support to know what their rights are and what's expected of them as they go to work, so that work is a good experience for them. So can I thank you for doing this project? It's a fantastic project, and thanks for everyone that's been involved.